Well, this week's Sky Cricket podcast comes the morning after England's solitary test defeat of the summer. What has been a pretty successful summer overall, with 2 series wins and 5 test victories, ended on a bit of a damp squib defeat to Sri Lanka, a heavy defeat by 8 wickets. And Nas, not a very good performance all round. Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Michael. Yeah, it was a poor performance, wasn't it? I think you've written it up in the Times, the worst of the Bazball era. So they had key moments. They went back slightly to areas of concern. You know, when they're ahead of the game, were they quite ruthless enough in this test match? They had been in the previous 5, that sort of version of Bazball 2. They'd reset to make sure that they were more ruthless. But in this particular test match, they sort of slip back into moments where either if you're out of nick, say Dan Lawrence or whatever, your default setting is, as opposed to try and grind out a score, it's like we will Bazball our way to a score, charge down the pitch and play as many shots as possible. Or if you're ahead of the game, 261 for 3 in the first innings or 60-odd lead on first innings, we can't possibly lose from this situation, so we'll go as hard as we can, as opposed to just be careful with the game of cricket and make sure you realize that the opponent is very talented. And if you do give them a sniff, they will come back at you. I do think we have to focus in on Sri Lanka as well. I thought they were excellent. I thought they showed a lot of character and fight. And they played in a way that sort of epitomizes the great Sri Lankan sides. If you think of in the field, they had real aggression about them. I think Kumar translated some of the Sinhalese that was going on between Fernando and Kumara when they were batting, and almost like that Devon Malcolm moment of against South Africa, wait till you come out to bat. And I thought they were more aggressive when they bowled, and then with the bat they showed some high class quality batting. Nissanka in particular in both innings looked an absolute joy to watch. So credit to Sri Lanka, and England just slipped slightly back into that non-ruthless streak that we have seen over this summer.
Yeah, but it begged the question where Pathum Nissanka was for the first test, which I slightly put to him, probably unfairly on the podium, because he just looked rather, sheepish. Obviously, it wasn't his call, but it did beg the question where he was, because he looked a quality player, didn't he? He's only played 11 tests, 26 years of age, and you hope that this 100 for him will spark a significant run in the test team. He looks a player for all formats. Obviously, he's already got a double 100 in ODI cricket, and he looked a serious talent. And Ollie Pope denied the complacency. I put that to him after the game. Lots of the adjectives surrounding England's performance have been around a sense of complacency, a bit slapdash, a bit slack. I mean, it did look that way. And of course, they're allowed a bad performance. All teams have bad performances. But I guess it's just the lessons learned. I mean, it is the oldest lesson in the book, isn't it, with professional sport, that if you just take your eye off the ball for a minute, or just take your foot off the pedal for a minute, things can come back to haunt you. I thought it with the Australians in town, it was a bad moment for Harry Brook to show that frustration. That in the first innings when they bowled that wide line, that 7-stump line, and we touched on it in commentary and in the third man's chair. And he was very evidently frustrated, throwing his arms around, and then went to stand on 7th stump. I should imagine 1 or 2 Aussies up in Scotland in the middle of that series there were watching with interest.
Yeah, and probably India as well. And I think Harry Brook is someone that will learn from that. I think you learn more from defeats, actually. So I'm someone now that tries not to get too up when they're winning. When they were 5-0 up this summer, I wasn't like, wow, all England's issues are solved and they're absolute favourites now for the Ashes away and to beat India at home. There's that sort of balance that, yeah, it's West Indies and Sri Lanka. And if we play our best cricket at home with the Duke's ball, we should beat them in a series. And they did beat them in both series. But in the same way, I wouldn't get all doom and gloom about this test match. Mistakes are part of sport, Af. You know that. People make mistakes. And this is still an extremely good England side. They've only lost 1 series in this Stokes-McCullum era. And if you read some of the headlines today, it's almost like, whoa, this Bazball thing is just not working. And it's an absolute, you know, they're disrespecting Test cricket. I'm not so sure about that. I just think
I felt that as well with some of the reaction. That it's almost like every game becomes a referendum on the philosophy of baseball, which, you know, as a pundit or as a writer, you have to call a bad performance as it is, which is a bad performance. But that's not to say that you're damning the whole philosophy. And the same the other way around when England play really well. But I suspect because of the manner with which this team plays, which is a bit more kind of up and down, isn't it, in terms of, you know, the speed with which they play. So some of the defeats, like the defeat to South Africa a couple of summers ago, and this one can come very quickly. That then exaggerates perhaps some of the reaction to it, both on the good side and on the bad side. But as you say, all teams both have good days and bad days. But there's no doubt that this was a bad performance, because from 261 for 3 in the first innings, Sri Lanka 90 odd for 5, then to get bowled out for 30 odd overs in the second, you know, you have to reflect on not a good performance. But all told, a good summer. And the key, I mean, lots of players introduced and reintroduced, but the two key ones to me, the finds of the summer, seem to be Jamie Smith and Gus Atkinson. They were outstanding, weren't they?
Yeah, and just going back to yesterday, actually, that was the one thing that surprised me a little bit. We debated on the podcast last week, would you play Gus Atkinson 6 games in a row? We'd noticed his speeds had been going down, and he picked up a niggle in this test. And I was a little bit surprised yesterday Gus Atkinson was still bowling. They need, you know me, you played under me. I was win at all costs, but 20 to win, 7 wickets in hand or whatever, game's gone. Gus Atkinson is still bowling with a niggle. He's now been rested from the one-day internationals. Josh Hull comes on with 7 needed to bowl bouncers when he's obviously dead on his feet, really. The only upside on that, the only thing that can happen there is an injury. So what is the upside from him bowling that one over? And Shoaib Bashir, he came on towards the end and bowled a couple of beauties to Angelo Matthews, nearly bowled him through the gate. I'd have liked to have seen him bowl a little bit more in that attacking line into the Josh Hull footholds. I thought he was under bowled. So there were some surprising things at the end of that game yesterday. With the ball, we often highlight the batting, but with the ball, I thought that they looked exhausted. Actually, they looked like it was the 6th test of the summer. But you're right, Jamie Smith is a very, very impressive individual. You know, I interviewed him at the start of play yesterday. When you interview people, you just sort of it comes across that he has real confidence, not arrogance, just confidence in, I'm ready for this. He just seems such a talent. That innings he played, the game would have been done before yesterday if it wasn't for that innings he played. He was quite brilliant. Again, averaged best part of 50, kept really well. All the doubts are about his keeping, not his batting. And Atkinson, player of the summer for me. I know you had to hand out some trophies to Root or whatever. For me, Gus Atkinson was absolutely incredible. And the decision to retire Jimmy Anderson and move away and move into a different direction, as you said last week, if that hadn't happened, you know, he may have not played all the games like he did. But with bat and ball, he was quite brilliant.
He looked pretty weary by the end, and I would make a plea for some breaks with it between these test matches. We've had 2-3 test match series there, which had a break in between them, obviously, from the West Indies series to the Sri Lanka series. But 3 back-to-back tests. Normally, in the past, we've had, well, it was a long time before we had consecutive tests, because obviously touring teams used to go and play all the counties. Those days have gone. That's not going to happen again. But I think two back-to-back tests, but then the teams need a bit of a break, a week or whatever it is. I think it's very hard to play back-to-back-to-back. And I thought the effects of that were seen. And what was going to happen, it's going to affect the quality of the cricket, and everything that we've talked about, the scheduling and all that, you know, in the end affects the quality of the cricket. And Test cricket is supposed to be the pinnacle. Everybody says it's the pinnacle. Well, let's try and give the schedule, give it a chance to be high quality every time we see it.
And the flip side of that is that most sides arrive. We did that piece on traveling away from home and sides not winning because they haven't got overs in their legs. They're not ready. They're undercooked. by the end of the series, Sri Lanka looked ready for another couple. You know, I mean, their bowlers looked like they got some more overs in their legs. Their batters looked used to conditions and the moving Duke's ball. And you could argue what we watched from Sri Lanka yesterday and this week, they deserve more than just the odd one test series in England. So what we made of the summer in general, I know we've got white ball series to come. You've got Blast Finals Day, but an enjoyable summer.
Yeah, I think it's been challenging for the game just because of, you know, the eyeballs have been elsewhere for a lot of the summer. I mean, it's very unusual to have a World Cup, Cricket World Cup, World T20 in the middle of the English summer. Obviously, the Euros, which took a lot of attention in a football mad nation, and then the Olympics in August. So the game has been battling for attention, and some of the Test cricket that we've seen, I think, has been, you know, poor quality, and that's not helped that battle for attention. So it's been a slightly challenging summer, I think, in many ways.
And by the way, it's been a mad summer because there's been complete role reversal. All right, you have been put down to third man to do funnies of me falling off chairs and everything, and I'm doing the investigative journalism of breaking stories on Moeen Ali.
Well, that's what I was going to come to. You scooped us all with the retirement of Mo.
What do you make? You know my opinion. What's your opinions of Moeen Ali, the cricketer? Where would you rank Moeen Ali, the cricketer?
I was looking. I mean, how you tag these things is personal opinion. I'd say he's a really significant cricketer for England. I mean, he is an Ashes winner, a double World Cup winner, somebody who's played almost 300 games across all formats. 200 test wickets as a spinner, which is behind only Underwood and Swan. You know, he said, I think his favourite moment was that test match hat-trick at the Oval to finish a test off. And importantly, I think as well, we have Stuart Broad in the dressing room, and he said he's one of his favourite teammates, and everything you hear from England players suggests that he was a really good bloke to have in the dressing room. So he's been called a bit of a utility player, and what people mean by that is a bit selfless. He'll do whatever the team demands and requires, whether it's up the order, down the order. So yeah, a wonderful career. He seemed pretty happy. He came up to the commentary box, didn't he? And he seemed pretty chilled and relaxed and happy with his decision. Obviously, a few of these retirements are coming, like Dawid Malan a couple of weeks ago, because the contracts are coming to the end now. But it sounds like Mo, he's still going to play a little bit, both domestically and across the franchise world, but then perhaps eyeing a future in coaching. And strikes me that he might have the, you know, that type of character and laid back character, but knowing the game, that he might be knowing the game pretty well, he might be a good coach if that's the avenue that he goes down.
Yeah, absolutely. Strikes me as a thoroughly decent individual. Actually, I was doing him quietly behind the scenes, doing that interview with him, and I loved the half an hour I sat down on Zoom and chatted with him. You know, you see Mo around the traps, but he never really mingled too much with players. And then he came in and did that lovely interview with Broady and Ward and myself, where he talked through his career and some of the brain fade moments. He always struck me as very honest, and I don't know now actually, because you speak to Broady and Moeen himself, that when he used to come over and do interviews, he was very honest about himself. But he'll also say, and Broady will say, he'll sit in the dressing room and sort of go, "What did I do there?" And then about half an hour later, go, "Well, that was an absolute gaffer, wasn't it?" When he was caught beating the wicket or something. So,
but you know, a lot of the players that I've known have had that approach. You know, I played a little bit with Beefy at the start of his career, and he would never admit that it was his fault. You know, it was like somebody had moved in the background, or it was the sight screen, or he got the only ball that darted off the seam all day. And what people have over a long career, if you play a long career, obviously the game eats away at you, and you need mechanisms and ways of offloading that pressure. And sometimes that can be just you know, you have a kind of wall of defense around you. And, you know, it's not, it wasn't all your fault, if you know what I mean. They're just mechanisms that everyone has for coping with the pressures of the game. And however you do it, you have to find a way to do that, because no matter how easygoing you might appear on the outside, you know, if you play that many games across that many formats, you know, the game will eat away at you. You know, we saw when he went to Australia and problems with Nathan Lyon, and, you know, everybody has to go through those hard times. So you play that many games, you're pretty tough and flinty character.